Well, if you remember almost 20 years ago, the Brat Pack, they spelled Brat with 3 T's, had a song called Carousel. It says, "Here me up on the carousel. It goes up, it goes down." I think I also mentioned something in the lyrics about spinning around and around and around here. Well, anyway, let's talk about the head coaching carousel that's going on in the CFL here, as already going to chime in with some off-season CFL news here, as we knew coming in after the Grey Cup was awarded here, 3 teams were already looking for new head coaches, and actually ultimately it's 4 teams that is going to have a new head coach on the sidelines for the 2020 CFL season here. And actually I also got some Calgary Stampeders news as well, as there are also going to be some coaching changes. One was a decision made that Calgary made, and another decision that we lost a coach as part of the carousel here. So I'll try to go in chronological order here. As I mentioned, that there were 3 coaches that we knew there were going to be, 3 teams replacing coaches of the Grey Cup here. The 4th team that made a change announced they were moving on with their existing head coach and bringing a new head coach here. So first, we knew the Ottawa RedBlacks decided to let Rick Campbell go. He was the only head coach that worked with the Ottawa RedBlacks since they joined the CFL and led them to 3 Grey Cup championships, including winning it in 104th in 2016 in Toronto there. So he was there for 6 seasons there. The BC Lions, they decided to move on with defensive-minded coach Devon Claybrooks, who after spending several seasons with the Calgary Stampeders, after he retired as a player, he was the defensive coordinator here in Calgary, and then he went to BC to be the head coach and was let go after 1 season there. And then the Edmonton Eskimos, they decided to move on from Jason Moss after being the head coach there since 2016. He was part of many coaching staffs, including being the quarterbacks coach for the Toronto Argonauts in 2012, and he was on the Ottawa RedBlacks, part of their coaching staff in 2015 there. And after when the Edmonton Eskimos won the 103rd Grey Cup in 2015 there, I haven't even boarded my plane to go home to Calgary the next day, and all we kept hearing was how Chris Jones pretty much was going to go to Saskatchewan and took the whole coaching staff with them from the Edmonton Eskimos, and they eventually hired Jason Moss, and they were mediocre. Made some playoff appearances, but never got to the Grey Cup under Jason Moss. And then it was the Toronto Argonauts. They did, towards the end of the season, they decided to hire Mike Pinball Clemens, the legend, to become the general manager, and they took some time. They took their time with it, and ultimately they decided to move on from Corey Chamberlain to be the head coach here. So those are the 4 teams that you're going to see a new face at the sidelines leading their teams in 2020 here. So that's kind of the gist of all the coaches that won't be back as head coaches in 2020. However, a couple of those guys will be employed as of this recording in 2020 in various capacities here. So first, coach that got hired in the off-season, actually Rick Campbell, he was let go from the Ottawa RedBlacks. Well, he's actually going to go all the way west to the west coast to Vancouver. He got named the head coach of the BC Lions there. So Rick Campbell will be head coach again in the CFL, but this time he'll be the head coach of the BC Lions here. He definitely started his way up to the ranks there. I mean, he is the son of Hugh Campbell, the coaching legend that built the Edmonton Eskimos there, and I'm not too sure if it's, I actually almost think about it, I'm not too sure if it's son or grandson, but he's related from the Hugh Campbell family there. and he worked his way from the Edmonton Eskimos. He actually worked in the Edmonton Eskimos as defensive coordinator, and he actually was here in Calgary as the defensive coordinator before he became named the first head coach of the Ottawa RedBlacks. And I think he was kind of the fall guy here, because Ottawa definitely wasn't as good of a team here, as they got decimated in free agency. While the BC Lions, I think they definitely underachieved. They loaded up on offense, but then they had some issues on the offensive line here, and we'll see what happens with Rick Campbell in BC here. As we'll see if he can bring some fresh ideas and has head coaching experience that can prove fortunes for the BC Lions here. So as we know, don't know where Devon Claybrooks is going to be working as a district coordinator. I'm only recording this in the middle of December here, but Devon Claybrooks, as I know, is still available. So the next team that hired their next head coach was the Ottawa RedBlacks, and the Ottawa RedBlacks went to the Grey Cup champion, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I mean, congratulations to Winnipeg on winning their first Grey Cup in 29 years, and got to witness that, a couple weeks ago in Calgary. They hired Paul LaPolice, who was the offensive coordinator for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers this past season, and he actually called some brilliant plays in the Grey Cup there. And I figured it was a matter of time before Paul LaPolice was going to be a head coach again. I mean, he's worked various coordinator positions. Most notably mentioned, he was the offensive coordinator for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. He actually at one time was the head coach of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I think he got unceremoniously became the fall guy and was let go. I mean, the Winnipeg was struggling, I think, back in 2010 there, and then the next week it looked kind of hilarious that they lost Labor Day Sunday 52-0, I think it was, and thinking I saw Paul LaPolice grinning there, and then he spent some time on the TSN. Actually, it wasn't 2010, it was after, I think it was 11 or 12 there, around there, where he got shellacked, or he got let go, and then Winnipeg got shellacked there. But hey, I also remember he was the special teams coordinator for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And speaking of Grey Cups in Calgary here, one of the things you can probably find on YouTube here, when Saskatchewan got caught with too many men on the field there, and you can definitely tell Paul LaPolice is a smart, passionate mind. Mind you, any coordinator would do this, but there was a scene of Paul LaPolice smashing his hat on the table up in the press box there, thinking, damn, we just lost a Grey Cup here. But that aside, I was in the moment there, but it's nice to see Paul LaPolice come back to be the head coach here, and we'll see what happens in free agency here, but I think he definitely has his work cut out for him for Ottawa, but we'll see what happens in free agency. I mean, he was part of the coaching staff that finally gave the Winnipeg Blue Bombers their first Grey Cup in 29 years there. So those are the two new head coaching posts there. But this happened in the same day here for the Edmonton Eskimos and the Toronto Argonauts here. As there was lots of speculation on guys like Ryan Dinwiddie and Mark Killam actually were getting interest on getting potential head coaching jobs throughout the CFL here. And one of those guys, Mark Killam, actually apparently was in the running for the Edmonton Eskimos head coach here, and actually he's kind of resurfaced back in the CFL here for the Edmonton Eskimos, but actually Scott Milanovic is going to be the head coach of the Edmonton Eskimos here. As Scott Milanovic, he definitely is most noted for, actually, if you remember back in 2003 for the Calgary Stampeders, yeah, we might want to forget that year, because that was definitely the height of the train wreck during the F Troop. But one of the quarterbacks that we had, that is the same Scott Milanovic that was thrown in the fire there, and definitely was trying to learn the Canadian game, and actually ultimately, I think he resigned as a player and was the quarterbacks coach, and that's where he started his CFL career there. He did actually play with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here, but he has definitely a wealth of experience, definitely a lot more recently in the CFL there, because he was the offensive coordinator for the Montreal Alouettes when they won their couple Grey Cups there, where he worked with Anthony Calvillo there, and then eventually became the Toronto Argonauts head coach, and he was there for 5 or 6 seasons, if I remember right. He was the head coach of the Toronto Argonauts when they won the Grey Cup 2012, the 100th Grey Cup. So Scott Milanovic, and I know he left the CFL after 2016 to go back to the NFL, and I think most recently he was the quarterbacks coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and no one actually mentioned about Scott Milanovic as a potential name because I think no one thought he was available, and it was a surprise that we saw Scott Milanovic is now the head coach of the Edmonton Eskimos here. So I think definitely he could turn the team around for the Edmonton Eskimos, or have him take the next step there, as he'll be working with Trevor Harris and Greg Ellenson, and they still have those guys and CJ Gable here. I mean, they definitely then have Amanda Sewell and Keon Boateng, so I think he has pieces to work with up at Edmonton there. I mean, it depends how strong the West Division is too. It's kind of like the Metropolitan Division in the NHL there. It's a tough division to make headway there, but we'll see how Scott Milanovic does in Edmonton there. And I definitely, for a CFL fan and looking just at the Edmonton Eskimos, I gotta say they definitely found a solid hire there. And then the last team that ultimately decided to get a head coach is the Toronto Argonauts decided to move on from Corey Chamberlain, and they hired former quarterbacks coach from the Calgary Stampeders, Ryan Dinwiddie. So this will be his first head coaching gig in the CFL here, and be interesting to see how that goes. I mean, it'd be also interesting to see who's going to be the quarterback for the Toronto Argonauts here. They had McLeod Bethel Thompson there, and they eventually shipped out Zach Collaros as part of that trade at the deadline there, and some speculation that maybe wherever Ryan Dinwiddie goes, Nick Arbuckle could be going there. And actually, currently as of this recording, I hear Nick Arbuckle is working out for the New York Giants in the NFL here, but I think the general consensus here in Calgary is that Nick Arbuckle is not going to return to be the backup to Bo Levi Mitchell here. However, Calgary is going to still need to look at possibly is Montel Colzart going to be the backup, or find someone else, because if it wasn't for Nick Arbuckle, when he played in the first half of the season there, we would have not hosted a playoff game. So that's the coaching carousel. So to recap, the BC Lions, they hired Rick Campbell, formerly of the Ottawa RedBlacks. And then the Ottawa RedBlacks, they hired Paul LaPolice, who was formerly with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers as the offensive coordinator. And then the Edmonton Eskimos, they hired Scott Milanovic as the next head coach. Most recently in the CFL, he was the head coach of the Toronto Argonauts, and he left after 2016 to go to the NFL to work with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then the Toronto Argonauts, they decided to go with a new head coach in Ryan Dinwiddie, most recently with the Calgary Stampeders quarterback coach. And he was a player with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the Saskatchewan Roughriders before he retired and actually started his coaching career right here in Calgary with the Calgary Stampeders. And Ryan Dinwiddie, he's going to be famously forever known as the quarterback that was thrown in the fire and made his first professional start for the 95th Grey Cup against the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and that was after Carreri Jones leading them all the way to the Eastern Final, and then he got hurt in the Eastern Final there. And that Grey Cup was definitely a strong defensive battle there, and that's another what if for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, as if Carreri Jones would have been available there. But that stresses getting back to the point of you need a backup quarterback that's capable in case if you get into that situation there. So the Calgary Stampeders have lost Ryan Dinwiddie. And actually, going back to the coaching carousel here, the Calgary Stampeders have decided to move on from Pete Costanza, who was the receivers coach. He's been the receivers coach for the Calgary Stampeders since 2008 here. So, and I think the reason why they decided to part ways was, he did a great job with the receivers. He worked with plenty of great receivers over the years, and the last couple of years we've had injuries there, and I still like our situation of receivers, but I know there's a coaching cap in the CFL, and I think he was a victim of that. I mean, if no one got poached from any jobs elsewhere in the CFL, or had a more lucrative opportunity in NFL, or I personally would have been just as happy to have everybody back from the coaching staff from past season to this season here. And the Calgary Stampeders must have knew something about losing Dinwiddie to the Toronto Argonauts. As I said, I should also say he was also the offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach. But Pat Delimonaco, who has been with the Calgary Stampeders since 2014 after working with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, he was first brought in as the offensive line coach. He's now going to be the offensive coordinator, adding on with the offensive line coach here. So he actually got that promotion with that extra title before Ryan Dinwiddie went over to Toronto. He must have, the Calgary Stampeders must have knew something, because that announcement actually came the day before Ryan Dinwiddie went to the Toronto Argonauts here. So I'm going to say best of luck to the new coaches in the new places, minus when you're playing my boys here. But the last part of the coaching carousel here is that Jason Moss, while he was ultimately let go from the Edmonton Eskimos here, he will be employed in the CFL next season, as the Saskatchewan Roughriders actually decided to move on from Stephen McAdoo, who was one of the many coaches who came along with Chris Jones from the Edmonton Eskimos after they won the Grey Cup, the 103rd Grey Cup in 2015 in Winnipeg there, and they all moved over to Saskatchewan there. So the Saskatchewan Roughriders, I'm actually going to say, coaching-wise, would have an upgrade in the coaching ranks for the offense, as actually it's been one of the sore spots for the Saskatchewan Roughriders in some points, as they have a very strong defensive team there. And I think the big part of why Saskatchewan wasn't able to get over the hump, and they did host the Western Final there, but didn't get over the hump and get to the Grey Cup, was the fact that they also had an injured Cody Fajardo, and maybe he was also nervous on the big stage of starting in the Western Final there. But it'd be interesting to see how the Saskatchewan Roughriders fare offensively with Jason Moss as the offensive coordinator here. So, I mean, all the other coaches, Devon Claybrooks, as of this recording, I haven't heard anything about him being employed, and same with Stephen McAdoo here, and I don't think any of those guys are going to come back to Calgary or come to Calgary. Steve McAdoo, as I know, was never part of the Calgary Stampeders organization, but Devon Claybrooks was, and I would love to have Devon Claybrooks back in Calgary at some capacity here, but I think those guys will probably still get some interest elsewhere in the CFL here. But this is my CFL head coaching carousel video here, as I was going to wait until February after free agency and figure I'll chime in on some off-season news here and any big free agents that are changing teams here, because that's definitely hard to predict on where teams are going to finish next year, because if you look at the free agency list, 80% of the league, it seems like, with all the one-year contracts, are all free agents here. And right now here in Calgary, well, typical John Hufnagel fashion is he actually slowly gets a lot of his off-season internal business done ahead of free agency, and that's what's been happening. And I'll recap that in February when it's all done here. And I still personally think the Calgary Stampeders, they need to get a running back. That should be the top priority. James Wilder Jr., he wanted to get released from the Toronto Argonauts because he didn't like how things are going. Then he tweeted out really after the decision to move on from Chamberlain and hire Ryan Dinwiddie. I'm not too sure if he regretted that, but could Calgary decide to get James Wilder Jr.? I know he has maybe some character issues, but I'm not too sure. But Calgary definitely needs to go look for a running back here, and if Nick Arbuckle is not going to return to be the backup to Bo Levi Mitchell, we definitely need an insurance policy, as we don't want to be screwed if anything happens to bowl Levi Mitchell and or has a bad game, the rare bad game, and he did actually have his worst game in the West semifinal, unfortunately there, but it's 2020 hindsight on decisions made in that game there, but I mean, it's not very often that I do some off-season CFL news until after free agency, since I've been more active on YouTube, but I figured with all the coaching changes in the CFL, I figured I should chime in, and some of this news affected the Calgary Stampeders, and I guess the one biggest return also that will not be back with the Calgary Stampeders in 2020 is actually punter Rob Maver. He decided to retire, and after 10 seasons, all with the Calgary Stampeders, we drafted him in 2010 when it looked like we were going to lose Sandro DeAngelis, as he decided to pursue free agency and possibly move on to the NFL. And ultimately, after when he left the Calgary Stampeders, he bounced around many spots in the CFL, and then he just vanished. He wasn't going to be one of those veterans like Bob Cameron is going to, or Louis Pasaglia that's going to kick until like their late 40s. But Rob Maver, he decided to move on and retire. Who knows if Rene Paredes will decide to do the same or still be with the team. I hope he's back, because he's definitely a great field goal kicker. I'm not too sure if Rene Paredes is going to assume the punting duties. The only time I've seen Rene Paredes punt was when Rob Maver actually got hurt in the 102nd Grey Cup, and Rene Paredes was jettisoned to doing punting duty, but who knows, could Calgary look for a punter here, but Rob Maver definitely was a big part of the community with the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, and he definitely has been a big part of the community, and we'll miss him. And he was also a pretty great punter, and not too sure if you can say future Hall of Famer. I mean, he played 10 seasons, and I mean, he did start off doing dual roles with the Calgary Stampeders, and in 2011 he struggled as a place kicker, and that's where eventually we had an audition, and Rene Paredes, who actually apparently was in the Hamilton Tiger Cats and Winnipeg Blue Bombers camps, and eventually he caught on here in Calgary, and he's been one of the top most reliable kickers in the league, and he's made some good kicks to win us some games over the year. And as a season ticket holder, I also like that lady a few rows down to us. She's a big Rene fan, and she always yells, "Let's go, Rene!" So I play along too when he comes out and kicks field goals, and hopefully he's back for that, and in fact his great field goal there. But yeah, that's definitely some early Calgary Stampeders offseason news. Plus, I just had to chime in on the CFL coaching carousel there. So, if you enjoy everything I do on my YouTube channel, I do all Calgary sports here and do some personal vlogs, tend to comedy and some other stuff here. If that sounds like you're interested in, just make sure you hit like, subscribe, and keep this thing going, and hit that bell icon to be notified as soon as I post something. And go Stamps go, and congratulations to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on the Grey Cup, but we want that cup back in 2020, and it'd be sweet to do it in Regina, as that's where the big game is. And I might have to willing to try Airbnb. Maybe that'd be my solution to find a room, to find a place to stay in Regina next year, but we'll see how that plays out. So go Stamps go, and I'll see you in the next video here when I post some more content. Thank you.